Commissioner Ames, and right here from his Faraday bicycle, Commissioner Spivak. Commissioner Brannon will be joining us about at the top of the hour. And so we'll start with any items of interest from commissioners? Almost so much happening, where to begin? Okay. And now, without further ado, Director Diefenderfer, can we beg you to offer the director's report?
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chairs, Commissioners. Patricia Diefendorfer for the record, Chief Planner with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Happy to provide a couple of updates. Wanted to just let the Commission know that this evening there is a city-hosted waterfront study open house. If you recall, we gave an informational briefing to the Commission on a urban design study that BPS, the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, is heading up, and it is in support of work that the Bureau of Parks and Recreation are doing to update the designs and do a competition for designs for the Waterfront Bowl, Tom McCall Waterfront Bowl Park. So we're jointly, so BPS and the Parks Bureau are jointly hosting this open house to solicit some input from the public on both the urban design study and some very initial thinking about the waterfront park. So that's happening this evening. And another thing that I just wanted to update on is some of you may have saw that BPS staff did provide an informational presentation to the Climate Resilience and Land Use Committee last Thursday on the Critical Energy Hub policy project discussion draft. So that was just an opportunity for staff to give, again, an informational presentation to that committee on the alternatives that are circulating currently as part of the discussion draft and which staff is seeking public input on currently. And I believe the comment period is open for another couple of days on that, so through October 17th. So just wanted to make sure the Commission was aware of that. If you are interested in watching that online, that is available. And then finally, I think recently did a training, a little bit of an update on what we're doing in terms of historic preservation work plan. One of the things that was discussed in that briefing was a legacy business study that that staff are currently working on, and wanted to just let the Commission know that there is a survey out right now that we're encouraging Portlanders, both people who own legacy businesses or just community people who are interested in the program, to complete the survey and give some feedback that will inform the study. So that is currently out, and that survey will be open through October 31st. So I think those are all of the updates that I wanted to provide, and I just let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, we're happy to continue on with our agenda. Thank you so much, Chair Ralph.
Thank you. And I believe while we're talking about things that are open, the economic opportunity analysis discussion draft is still open. Is that correct?
Yes, both the economic opportunity analysis discussion draft and the Columbia Corridor and Industrial Land Project, E-Zone Project, Environmental Zone Project, both of those discussion drafts are circulating for public comment right now. And I am forgetting off the top of my head the comment period. I believe it goes through November 11th, I want to say. I believe, yeah.
I'm not sure. Thank you so much. And thank you for that. I couldn't remember the order of the string of words for Columbia Corridor, so I appreciate you braving through that.
My pleasure.
Vice Chair.
Follow-up question on the Climate and Sustainability Commission. Can you provide a little bit more context on their role or how they will be providing input on zoning code plans and projects that have sustainability-related issues at their heart?
Are you talking, sorry, you're asking about the council committee, correct?
No, the commission. I'm sorry if I
commission.
misspoke. Yes, the
Okay.
sustainability. And can you, what is the name? I always like.
Okay, so
The
the,
Sustainability and Climate Commission.
the SCC, the Sustainability and Climate Commission, they, I think we're still, they're only about to have their second meeting. I think we're still trying to figure out what things they are interested in seeing and how we will coordinate with that commission on such items. So there's no plan at this moment to have, were you asking specifically about the critical energy infrastructure hub? Which project were you asking specifically about?
Yeah, I mean, both generally and it was that specific
That specific-
circumstance that raised the question. But if it's a similar type of dynamic where like the Historic Landmarks Commission or Design Commission would provide a letter to Planning Commission for consideration, or if there's some other coordination or collaboration
Yeah.
that happens with that body.
I think that those are great questions that we're actually in the process of meeting with that staff to understand better how that coordination can happen. So again, they had their first meeting. They're still working on bylaws and things like that. I think I can give you further updates in the future when we have more conversations about, there may be instances where, their role is very different than the Planning Commission. And there may be instances where there's topics that the two commissions have in common, and there may be some interest in one commission giving, for example, the Planning Commission feedback. I think we'll have more information for you on that as time goes by and more of these discussions unfold.
Great question. Yeah. Commissioner Spivak.
Thank you. This is a question about the CEI hub. I've only know what I've read in the paper on it, and it seems like, but it's not always accurate. Does the discussion draft have multiple scenarios, but when it goes to proposed draft, there'll be one scenario?
Yes, so we did something a little bit different with a few of these drafts that are out right now. The discussion draft does have several alternatives, both for the CEI hub project, and that's also true for the economic opportunities analysis and the Columbia Corridor Industrial Land Project. All of those projects do have multiple scenarios in the discussion draft for purposes of eliciting feedback from the public. When these projects come to the Planning Commission, they will, as is our typical practice, have one proposed plan for the commission to deliberate on. Yes.
So I guess this follow-up, I think, would be helpful when it comes to us to hear what the, in order to interpret public comment, know what the proposals were at the discussion stage, because the public will be responding to that, right, at that point? Oh, no, actually, they'll have a chance to respond to the proposed draft before it
They'll
gets
have a
us, too.
chance to
Okay.
respond to the proposed
Never mind.
draft.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And just a quick clarification, the comment period for the economic opportunities analysis and the Columbia Corridor Industrial Land Project is November 10th. I said November 11th, was one day off, I apologize. And then I was handed a friendly note as a reminder about, one of the main focuses of the Sustainability and Climate Commission is to prepare a climate action plan. So that's going to be their primary work program, if you will, and focus. But I think Vice Chair Thompson, your question is still, I think a good question. There probably will be aligned interests over time, and we'll have to figure out how coordination happen amongst the commissions. Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you. This is wonderful. See, Commissioner Brannan has joined us. We're at the director's report part of our meeting. Great to see you. And just, I believe, also related to the three projects, CEI, Economic Opportunity Analysis, and Columbia Corridor, that the tentative agenda has been updated on the Planning Commission's website. So anyone who's interested, I believe the CEI Hub is coming for hearing December 2nd. And related, is it not? It is not. Never mind. I didn't say that.
I believe it's a briefing on December 2nd
Briefing,
with the
thank you.
hearings after the new year. So
Okay.
they're being structured in such a way, I'm wrong. Okay, you can go ahead and correct me. Go ahead.
On December 2nd, we'll have the briefings for all of the main three. And then December 16th is the hearing for CEIAB.
Great.
In the new year, we'll have the hearings for the other two,
analysis.
which will be paired up.
Great. Sorry, thank you. Apparently, we all should check the tentative agenda on the Planning Commission's website. Great. And the since we were talking about the Sustainability and Climate Commission, their next, for anyone who is interested in not just attending this live stream, but others, theirs is Thursday, and among others, they will be choosing their chair. So very excited about that. And we will, if there's no other questions related to the director's report. Okay, thank you. Let us go to consent agenda. Do we have a motion to approve, and it is the minutes from our last meeting?
So moved.
Great, thank you, Vice Chair O'Meara. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Thompson. And a show of hands, all in favor? Great. Any opposed? Delightful. Okay. And now let us turn to one of our main events, the Regulatory Improvement Code Amendment Package 11, or Recap 11. This is Sandra Wood, JP McNeil, and Shannon Buno. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair Routh. Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Sandra Wood. I'm with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and I am the Code Development Manager. And today we are continuing our conversation from last time about Recap 11, which, as you may recall, stands for Regulatory Improvement Code Amendment Package. This is the 11th such package, and some people refer to it as an omnibus. It has many amendments on disparate parts of the code that we packaged together for efficiency's sake. At your hearing last time, commissioners raised some questions. In the interim time, staff have also offered, identified some further improvements we can make to the code. On Friday, we issued a memo that's dated October 10th, and I hope you've had a chance to take a look at that. We're going to use the memo today to walk through the information that we have to present to you. But I got ahead of myself. I forgot to introduce my team. JP McNeil is the project manager for the project. Shannon Buno is our code editor. And we have two colleagues from Portland Solutions, who is the branch of the city that works on the shelters and can answer some of the questions that you had about the operations for the shelters, which we provided some information about the land use components in the memo. But the operational components is beyond our expertise. So thank you very much, colleagues, for being here. And we'll get to that in a moment. So JP will pull up the memo, and what we're proposed to go through today is there are 5 amendments on. Do we need to start? Yeah. Okay. We might start with the shelter conversation. Do they have a time limit? Do you need to leave? No, you're okay on time. Okay, let's do what we were originally planning on doing, which was to go through the memo. There are 5 proposed amendments in the memo. 4 of them are from staff in response to some of the testimony. Some of it's in response to some of the questions that you brought up, and JP will explain those. So those are the top 4 amendments. And then the 5th amendment is proposed by Commissioner Thompson and Commissioner Spivak, and they can, I'd invite them to walk us through that when we get to that moment. And then we can have a conversation about shelters and some of the questions that you all had last time. And there we go.
Thank you, Sandra. All right, well, I've pull up the memo that we can walk through. Just for the record, I'm JP McNeil with BPS. And it's coming. Okay. So as Sandra said, we are going to walk through the memo that we provided you last week and go through the amendments. We'll start with the staff proposed ones. And I'll go through those one by one and give you space to, if you want to talk about it after each amendment. So the first amendment is fairly straightforward. It is an amendment to insert a graphic about the drive aisle. This is related to item MP4, drive aisle width. And so that particular item, it clarifies that the area behind a parking space is considered a drive aisle and is not a driveway, and it's therefore subject to the requirements of the parking chapter. And what that means is that, and this is to help illustrate it, is that the gray area we're clarifying is an aisle, and the rationale for that is that there's a requirement for it to be a certain width of 20 feet to allow for maneuvering area. And so there's been some, with type driveways that are similar to what you see here in the figure, there's been narrower driveways that don't allow for enough maneuvering. And so PP&D had asked us to clarify that the area behind a parking space needs to be wide enough for maneuvering. And so that's how we're addressing that, and this figure is to help explain that a little bit since it's a kind of a wonky one. So, any questions about that? Okay. Moving along to our second amendment. This amendment has to do with the applicability of the zoning code in the right-of-way. And so generally, land within the right-of-way, it's regulated by Title 17, public improvements, but there are some exceptions when Title 33 applies with certain overlay zones like the design, historic, environmental overlays, in which case the overlay zone regulations do apply in the right-of-way, but it's clear that the regulations in the base zone, the 200s chapters, and plan district regulations don't apply. But there are some situations where the plan district chapter has regulations that apply to greenway and environmental zones. And so this just clarifies that those greenway and environmental regulations that apply in the plan district are applicable in the right-of-way. So it's just clarifying some language around that. Any questions? Wonderful. Third is an amendment related to landscaping and covered building areas. And so this there's some testimony and questions about this item, MP 13, which was the intent was to clarify that required landscaping areas can't be covered by buildings to make sure that there's adequate access to air or to sun and water. And there was some concern raised in the testimony that that might be a little bit too black and white and restrictive, and we heard some questions about that from commissioners. And so to give a little more flexibility so it's not too restrictive, this amendment would allow up to 1/3 of the required landscaping to be covered, so that some of it could still be covered for areas where it's appropriate, but still generally not covered and has access to sun and water and rain and whatnot. Any questions about that one? Okay. And then our fourth amendment, this is, we talked last time, this is about the medium-sized entertainment venues, item MP 18. So we talked about this one some last time. The intent of the item MP 18 is to add clarity to the distinction between different sized entertainment venues. There's major event entertainment, which is large events that are characterized by activities and structures that draw large numbers of people to specific events or shows. And so think the Moda Center, Memorial Coliseum, and then other types of entertainment venues like theaters or smaller music venues, nightclubs. Those are considered retail sales and service uses. But what the amendment was addressing was that it's not clear where one begins and one ends. And so when there was a proposal for a venue, the Live Nation venue, that was larger than your typical music venue nightclub, but smaller than the Memorial Coliseum or something like that, where does that fit in? And so the proposal that we had come up with was to set basically the threshold of when an event venue would be considered retail sales and service uses at 20,000 square feet. And it matters because the reason that this distinction matters is because there are more limitations on where a major event entertainment can be located versus a retail sales and service use. So the smaller venues, so the larger venues often almost always require a conditional use permit. And so there's a reason that we want to distinguish that, because commercial uses, retail sales and service uses, they're generally allowed in commercial zones and are limited or conditional uses in employment and industrial zones. So at the hearing on the 23rd, there was questions about how we determined that 20,000 square foot threshold was appropriate as to distinguish, and there are questions about what the degree of impacts, like crowds and traffic, that the different venues might generate, and how that 20,000 foot number fits in there. And so we went back to do a little bit more research, and so we wanted to look at some of well, one thing that we did is we wanted to research what was on the ground, what the existing theaters that are on the ground. One reason we wanted to, in the sizes of them, we wanted to make sure that we weren't creating any unintended consequences, like pushing what would be something allowed as a retail sales and service use, or exists on the ground and was thought of as a retail sales and service use, but it's over 20,000 square feet, and now it's a non-conforming use or an automatic conditional use. So we didn't want to be creating unintended consequences. And we also looked at sort of the terminology around, because some of the exceptions now talks about theaters are retail sales and service use, but what is a theater? And so we looked at what the zoning code says about theaters, we looked at the dictionary definition, we looked at the real estate, we looked at the building code, and it doesn't really match up. And so we found out, the long story is that we ended up with more questions than we had answers. Like, where does this plug in? Where does that plug in? And so what we're proposing is to pull this amendment from Recap 11, and so we could look at it deeper and do more analysis and maybe add it to a future recap. But we feel like there's more that needs to be done to make sure that we're not creating unintended consequences and that we're getting it right. So, any questions around that? Okay.
And before we go to the commissioner proposed amendments, we thought you might want to take these four as a group and maybe make one motion and vote on all four of them together, so we don't have to do that 4 times if you're all in agreement with all 4 of them.
Feel good about that? Are we, just a point of clarification or point of order, is this a straw poll, or should we, okay.
A real
on
motion
vote.
vote.
Okay, would anyone
Motion,
like
second,
to
and vote.
move?
I move to vote on these 4 amendments?
Four.
On these 4 amendments.
Second.
Hold on. I thought we were going to have to go to rock, paper, scissors there. Great. Any discussion of any of those 4 before we proceed? Commissioner Brennan, and we can't hear you. Hold on. We did.
Commissioner Brennan, can you say something so we can see if we can hear you? Oh,
Cannot. Commissioner Brennan, if you want to text me,
do you want
I
to
can read it.
try leaving the meeting and coming back? I don't know if that will help, but
Turning it off and on again. I'm so sorry.
is there anything we can?
Okay. I'm sorry, Commissioner Brennan. Commissioner Moss. Oh,
Oh, really?
Commissioner Knowles. So it's us. Commissioner Brandon, do you want to say it and we can just read the caption?
Commissioner Brandon, can you try speaking one more time?
Try one more time.
No.
No. Okay. Ah, shoot. Okay. Okay, yeah. Okay, is it something that would be, related to your vote? Yes.
We
We're
can
reading, we're reading on,
your
so ask
subtitles.
your question.
We can read what you're saying.
Okay, okay.
Well, perhaps we should move on to number 5.
do
And
that.
then Commissioner Brandon, if you wouldn't mind just emailing Autumn your question, and then I'll see what the question is, and I can respond to that, and then we can come back to the vote for 1 through 4.
Yeah,
in
and I think
case
she's
it's related
left.
to
She's gonna
that.
try to come back and we'll figure it out
Oh.
in the interim. So let's for the parliamentary purposes, we will table those motions, and move on. Thank you.
Okay. So for this amendment, this was the commissioner proposed amendment. So if we could see the screen again so that we can, the screen share. Thank you. And so I'm actually going to turn it over to Commissioner Thompson or Spivak, see if they would like to present this amendment a little bit, or then we can go through it a little more.
Sure. I can start, and then Commissioner Spivak, if you have anything to add. I thought that the testimony on this topic was reasonable, and have proposed an amendment that would allow for units, mechanical units, up to 5 feet, limited to 5 feet in any dimension, in side setbacks in single dwelling zones only. And I did want to confirm, JP, that the code chapter 33-110-245 is just for single dwelling zones. Is that right?
Yes, we didn't make the change in 120
Okay.
as well.
Okay, because there was some question about whether or not this screening relaxation should apply just to single dwelling or to multi-dwelling as well. And my sense of the issue is that having 1 or 2 units, which would be the practical maximum that you would see for a single dwelling zone, would be reasonable and not create a sort of bad neighbor condition where you have like a whole bunch of units lined up the entire exterior wall or facade or something like that. I think that not requiring screening provides a little bit more flexibility in the use of the side yard and setback to support accessibility and just the functional dimensions of having a fence and a unit that's held off the wall. There are some pretty narrow spaces there. And also just observing around town, I think that a lot of these are going in and not necessarily being screened anyways. That's my own sense of what's happening out there. So that was my stance on the amendment. And Eli, do you have anything you'd add to that?
I also been looking at these now. I've been biking around, and many times people don't have to screen it because they're outside the setback. In theory, you could put one of these in your front yard as long as it's more than 10 feet back, unscreened. People don't do that in practice very often. It's hard to ever find those examples. But I hear anecdotally from people through my electrified PDX hat, a lot of people are putting in cooling for their homes because they need it. And I think that this would make it easier to do that in those few situations where the house is pretty close to the property line. And fortunately, these units are fairly quiet, and they're not terribly ugly. And and when people do put screening on to comply with code, sometimes it's placed in a way that makes the unit not function as well, or makes it harder to maintain it. So I support this change.
Commissioner Knowles?
So as I read your amendment, it applies not just to heat pumps, but to all mechanical units. So for example, people are still putting in regular air conditioners in response to needing air conditioning. So your amendment would not require any sort of screening for those units either?
That's correct. It would generally, and AC units are heat pumps, just to be, they just don't provide the heating piece of it. But yes, it would require detached mechanical equipment, and actually as part of that, the original language is no more than 5 feet in height is the constraint, and we would be more detailed to make sure you couldn't have any height, width, or depth, which is borrowing language from the historic code of Portland, to make sure you don't have some obnoxiously big thing. Because it actually includes well pumps, it includes, I can't remember the list of things, that radon mitigation, emergency generators, all these other things as well. So we didn't want to leave a big loophole for someone to put some huge mechanical equipment unscreened in a side yard.
But heat pumps, in my experience, are pretty quiet. I agree with that, and they're relatively narrow. Air conditioning units are noisier. And so I'm just wondering, does it make sense to eliminate the screening requirements, which are there in order to provide both a visual and a noise reduction purpose? For an air conditioning unit, they're pretty, relatively noisy compared to a heat pump. So I guess I'm reluctant to completely eliminate screening requirements for that circumstance, because from a good neighbor perspective, you want your neighbor to be sensitive to how the impacts of those units on your house.
I mean, my sense of the functionality of the screening is that it's visual only, and that having any sort of like an open screen condition isn't going to do anything to really mitigate sound. I don't know, JP, if you have anything to.
I was going to add that from a staff perspective, we had considered language that would be different, that would say be an exemption for heat pumps, but that there's not really a good definition of heat pump in the code, and so it would be more complicated to try to define heat pump or do something like the testimony one of the testifiers suggested exempting equipment that was 2 feet from the house or less, or something to that extent. And it was getting to be, it would be harder to implement that than just the blanket exemption. And so that was the concern that we had about the heat pump itself, because I hear what you're saying, that there is a difference there, but we were concerned it would be harder to implement.
And can you clarify what the screening requirement is? It's L3 or F2, which means, L3 means landscaping, version 3, which is 6 foot high, evergreen shrubs.
Yes.
And F2 is
fully?
fully?
A fully site obscuring 6-foot fence.
So to Commissioner Thompson's, I mean, I guess I don't have the science behind whether a 6 foot high wooden fence fully obscure or dampens the sound. I believe it does. I think a 6 foot high evergreen shrub hedge would also dampen the sound. Heat pumps also blow heat out. So when they're in the setback, the air has to go somewhere. So I think we thought that the screening standard was getting to like visual, sound, and potentially the heat blowing issue too.
And I think at some point we have to lean on the noise code. Like another thing on this list is a generator, which makes a lot more noise than any of these things. But it would violate the noise code, which is a certain amount of decibels at the property line. So I think that would still apply, I guess. Wouldn't it? I mean, am I correct? The noise code would still apply if someone put in a noisy unit on the property line, they would still have to they can still be cited on the noise code.
Yes, but it does put the city in a bad situation because people are coming in for a mechanical permit. We're issuing a permit and saying you can come closer to the property line. The whole house has to be at 5 feet, but you can put this unit within the property line and you don't have to do screening. And then, a week later, it's operating and making a lot of noise and the neighbor's calling in for a code compliance case, which we just permitted. And it's a balancing
Understood,
act,
yeah.
yeah.
But also, someone could put the screening in and still violate the noise code,
True. True.
and you'd be in the
We-
same situation.
We think it helps. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on
Do you
that
have any
too.
data on, from the sort of nuisance perspective of how often you get complaints about these units?
We don't have any data on that. That is something that we didn't gather.
Yeah, we could look into.
Yeah.
Commissioners, Patricia Diefendorf for the record. I would just say that, it's good to have this discussion. We just want to make sure that what we ultimately have as the code, the update to the code is something that can be implemented without too much difficulty by PP&D. I mean, you can imagine if we start to talk about you have to screen this kind of thing, but not that kind of thing. We just want to make sure that we're not creating some implementation challenges as well. So just want to hope that you can take that into consideration.
And maybe not necessarily just for today, but in the future, if you're putting a heat pump in, I think you're generally putting in maybe a concrete pad. And then maybe in the future, you're taking the heat pump out and then putting some other mechanical equipment. And then all of a sudden that triggers different standards. I think in discussing with Commissioner Spivak, we were thinking, this is how our code gets complicated, right? Parsing out little bits of things. Even the side setback, mechanical equipment, usually the setbacks are the setbacks. But then we also have exceptions for decks going into the setback, mechanical equipment going into the setback, vertical structures and trellises being in the setback. So that's the balance we're trying to strike here.
Commissioner Knowles?
Just another question for the proposers. Can you say again how the current screening requirements impede the placement of heat pump units or their functionality?
With like a mini split heat pump, the intake or the exhaust is the compressor function is usually out the side of the unit. So it's not like, I think you were describing like a big air conditioning unit and it's got like the big fan on the top of it. And so
But my question specifically about the heat pumps, since
Yeah.
that's what you're
usually
motivation.
you want to have like an open free area between where that intake is occurring and any sort of obstruction or holding something up tight to it. So if you're installing one of those condensing units and then putting a vertical opaque screen right in front of it, I'm not, again, an engineer of heat pumps here, but that would be a concern about it impacting the efficiency of that unit.
Okay.
And just thinking about like the dimensional sizes of all of these, if you've got a typical side yard, your 5-foot setback, and you want to provide access to a rear yard or an ADU or have a unit at the back of the yard that's visitable, that is 32 inches clear at the smallest point, I'm not sure how you can do all of that and put a ductless heat pump and screen it. And if you have a fence, there's a lot of constraints there, and it's hard to fit all of that stuff in a narrow space.
Does the staff have a position on this?
We liked the amendment that we had proposed originally. One thing to note is actually this is the amendment that we proposed. If you look at the, well, it's not clear there, but this actually removes the amendment we proposed, which was just to screen it from the street. So we were adding, it's kind of blacked out, it's struck out there, but in B, 2B there in the language, it would say the equipment is screened from adjoining lots, walls, fence, by walls, fences. We're adding, the equipment is screened from the street or adjoining lots. And that was the amendment. And so that's being taken out, but this is actually going this is going further than what we had originally proposed in removing the screening requirements altogether. Our position was that we would prefer to keep the language in.
Okay. Any other questions, thoughts, comments? Would someone like to raise the amendment? Put forward?
I'll make a motion
Okay,
in favor of Amendment 5.
great. Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, great. Any further discussion? Okay,
Oh,
yeah.
I
Please.
mean, I
Oh, okay.
oh, is there more? Okay. It feels to me like I appreciate the staff push back on us as sort of more of a, like, heat pump a specific thing, but in looking at others, like Gresham, they have all these lists of all these renewable energy devices that you're allowed to do in situations you couldn't put a big generator. So in my mind, it's a little bit like solar PV. It's something that's sustainable. We've increasingly in the code made it easier to install it. And I think that by removing barriers, it used to be very hard to do them in historic districts at all. And I think this is sort of akin, people need cooling in their homes and they're trying to figure out where to put it. And when you have to put the cooling extra unit on the other side of the house from where you want to put it, that can add $1,000 to the cost just to run the routing. So I think this is I don't think it comes up very often, but I think it's a nod to people who are trying to live in our new climate.
Great. Other last thoughts before we call a roll? Commissioner Brennan. Okay. Autumn, would you call the roll, please?
And this is the roll for Amendment 5.
Correct.
Commissioner Alvarado?
Yes.
Commissioner Ames?
Aye.
Commissioner Brannan?
You said aye. I'm seeing aye.
Commissioner Knowles? Vice Chair O'Mara?
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock?
Aye.
Commissioner Spivak?
Aye.
Vice Chair Thompson?
Aye.
And Chair Routh?
Aye.
Can we just take a
Just-
quick
Yeah,
moment?
yeah,
please.
Because I think Commissioner Brannan, that her audio is being picked up by the closed captioning system.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure everybody's aware it appears to be an issue on our
On our
side,
end,
and we know
that's
that, right? Okay.
I was able to communicate with Commissioner Brannan, and when we get back to Amendments 1 through 4, I can include her clarifying question.
Right, but I
But
think we
also, I
need
think
to,
what we're saying is like
yeah.
that the issue, the audio issue is on our side. And so,
The audio is picking her up in the media room,
Uh-huh.
and I've tried to troubleshoot where I can. Right now, I'm in touch with Commissioner Brannan via message and email.
okay.
Forgive
So
the tech
I-
issue.
I apologize. I don't know that we can resolve the issue in the room right now, but perhaps we can, I think that Commissioner Brannan tried to vote. We want to make sure to capture.
Yeah.
Her vote.
And I tried to read it in by saying I am witnessing aye.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm,
Yeah.
because I didn't see it. I apologize. So I just wanted to confirm that. Okay, so this motion seems to carry, right? But, so maybe we can go back to amendments 1 through 4, if that's okay.
Yes, please. Thank you.
So since we left that off with Commissioner Brannan's question, can you share with us what her question is, Autumn?
Commissioner Brannan had a clarifying question regarding the venue amendment and wanted to confirm that the event venue-related code is not being proposed anymore. And that is correct, staff.
Yes, that's correct.
And Commissioner Brannan also noted that that would be her preference, as she doesn't see a benefit for special treatment and code change triggered by Live Nation.
Thanks for sharing that. Yes, that's, you understood correctly. So I think that leaves us with, there was a motion on the table and a second for moving amendments 1 through 4 together.
Correct. Thank you. And I think we are ready for vote. So, Autumn, could you please?
Commissioner Alvarado? Commissioner Ames?
Aye.
Commissioner Brannan? That's a
Seeing
raised
aye.
hand aye.
Yeah.
Commissioner Knowles?
Yes.
Vice Chair Amara?
Yes.
Commissioner Pollock?
Yes.
Commissioner Spivak?
Yes?
Vice Chair Thompson?
Aye.
And Chair Routh?
Aye. Dum-da-dum-da-dum.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. That moves us on to the questions that commissioners had. I think we can probably skip the daycare clarification that we were making unless anyone has any questions about that.
Okay.
Okay, we just wanted to correct the record about the daycare uses and their regulations. So we'll move on to outdoor shelters.
Okay, thanks, Sandra. So at the hearing on September 23rd, there were a number of questions that came up about item MP 14, which was the amendment to, it is the amendment to make changes to the outdoor shelter code and increase the number of allowed shelters. And so today we've put together some more information, some tables of information to help inform your deliberation a little bit. And then we also have folks from Portland Solutions that can answer some questions that you may have about the operations. And we also have an idea for a potential amendment if that's something that is appetizing to commissioners.
JP, pardon the interruption, but the memo is not showing up on the screen right now. So just-
Yeah, why don't we show the memo on the screen?
Yeah.
Share the screen again, and I will. I know. But it wasn't up. Oh, it wasn't up. Oh, I see. My bad. We're not talking about daycare. Okay, so the outdoor shelter. So what I want to just start off a little bit with is just the background of how we got here, why we're talking about this. So the outdoor shelter code was created with Shelter to Housing Continuum Project in 2021. And before that, there was no code for outdoor shelters outside of a declared emergency by City Council. The council declared an emergency in 2015, a housing emergency, and it's been extended several times through 2027. And so the existing outdoor shelters in the city's Safe Rest Village program, all of that has been operating under the housing emergency, which allows the shelters to be sited and permitted without having to come and show that it's in compliance with the zoning code. And so since over time, it's become clear that this is a more long-term problem that needs to be addressed. And so with Shelter to Housing Continuum Part 2, where we did some refinements to the code, and now here with Recap 11, we're trying to refine the code to reflect what's on the ground with the existing shelters so that when the emergency expires at some point, the existing shelters that are on the ground would be allowed to operate and not as is and be allowed by the zoning code. And so when the numbers of shelters units per zone were being, when that was come up with Shelter to Housing Continuum Part 1, there was a lot of outreach that happened with that. So staff was working with the operators of shelters, but they also were working with staff and city and county staff that were working on the Safe Rest Village program and shelter programs, and there was input from neighbors and neighborhood groups. And out of that came the numbers which we had landed on, which I guess I will move to. This is Table 1 that shows us what's currently allowed versus what is proposed. And so as you can see under the current code, their place that outdoor shelters are prohibited is in the open space zone. In single dwelling zones, RF to R2.5, 20 is the maximum number, and above that it's prohibited. And then in the multi-dwelling zones, commercial zones, there's, well, in the lower density multi-dwelling, it's 30 is the maximum today. You could get larger through conditional use. For the higher density multi-dwelling zones, commercial zones, EX, which is central employment, CI2, the maximum is 60 units allowed, and you could get larger through a conditional use. And then in the employment, general employment, EG, or industrial zones, the conditional use is always required, always be required. And so those numbers were arrived at largely talking with outdoor shelter providers who at the time were giving feedback on sort of the ideal size that was given at that time was around 60 or 70 units. But there was also discussion here before the Planning Commission that where the operators were saying that they could get larger. They could go as large as 200 provided there's adequate resources and staffing. So the perfect, as they described it, the perfect scenario would be lots of little shelters scattered throughout the city of smaller than 60, but in practicality, that's not something that's really possible to have everywhere. And so with adequate staffing, they can get larger than that. So the proposal here with Recap 11, we are just inching up some of those numbers for allowed outdoor shelters to match up with what's provided or is on the ground now, which I'll show you in a moment. But so we're proposing to go from 30 to 60 in lower density multi-dwelling zones, 60 to 100 in the higher density multi-dwelling zones, and then 60 to 200 in the commercial, central employment, and CI2 zones. And then there are currently 3 existing shelters that are either in an EG or an industrial zone and would be required to go through conditional use. For those, we're saying that any existing shelter that exists on the date that this code goes into effect is allowed outright, and it can continue to operate as long as it's on a publicly owned site. So that's the proposal that we're changing. And so what we did here was, why isn't this scrolling? It did some more research just to see what the existing shelters look like with some different characteristics. So the table 2 is all of the city-operated outdoor shelters. You can see all of them are either in commercial zones, and then there's the couple that are, one's in EX, central employment, one's in the industrial IG2 zone. There's one in the open space zone, and we're not talking about that here. And so you can also see that well, actually, I'll scroll down here. Table 3 are privately owned outdoor shelters. And they're a little different in terms of the zones. These ones tend to be, multiple are actually in residential zones, in single dwelling zones, or commercial zones. But the difference here is if you look at the number of units, in residential zones, the largest one has 16 units, and then even the other ones, they tend to max out around 40 units. Whereas the city-operated ones tend to be, while they're in commercial zones and employment, industrial zone, they tend to be larger. Another thing that we looked at was the distance to a residential zone with some of these larger ones. We were just trying to see if there was any differences there, and we did see that when it comes to the city-operated ones, they're generally a little bit away from, a block at minimum, away from residential zones, except for the Multnomah Village is the only one that actually abuts a residential zone. And so then if you look at the private, smaller ones, they tend to be either, as I said, in residential zones or adjacent to them, and that's because they're smaller, and so the impacts are a little bit less. Another thing we wanted to call out here was with the base floor area ratio, the FAR, just to talk a little bit about what is allowed on those sites. So especially with these city-operated ones, they're in commercial zones, some centrally located commercial zones. And so if they didn't have an outdoor shelter on them, they could be redeveloped with mixed-use development and fairly large structures with FARs up to 4 to 1, 2.5 to 1, 2.5 to 1 at the Multnomah Village, Safe Res Village, which means that they could be large mixed-use developments with a lot of residents and or commercial uses and parking and vehicles. So the point of that is just to illustrate that the outdoor shelters have their own impacts, but if the shelters go away, these sites can be redeveloped with large mixed-use developments that have their own impacts. So just to make sure that there's a little bit of a comparison there. And so that was the research that I had done. We could, I'd be happy to open it up for questions, discussions. We could also, if there's any questions for the Portland Solutions folks. We also, like, as I mentioned, there is an idea around an amendment. I don't know if you want to have some question and answer first and then talk about that, or talk about that first.
Does anyone have a preference? Yes, please, Vice Chair O'Meara.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair O'Meara, for the record. On the 2-acre max note, so when a site is larger than 2 acres, they're still capped
Yes.
at that unit max, or they could go through a conditional use. Is that correct? So if they
In
wanted
the-
to exceed 200 units because they're a larger site than 2 acres.
Actually, I think that, so that 2-acre note only applies to the industrial zones.
Okay.
So the industrial zones, let me pull up my, actually, the
And
tables here.
that's because of the buildable lands inventory and our other goals of protecting industrial land for
Okay.
industrial development.
So for the other sites, they're capped at that unit max. And there's not a consideration essentially for land area.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Brian Ames for the record. Just curious, I mean, the emergency's been going for 10 years, so we've got presumably some pretty good data at this point. What's the occupancy rate over that? I don't know how long a lot of these Safe Rest villages have been in existence, but what's generally occupancy or vacancy rate of these villages?
Push the button, yeah.
It's so persnickety.
It's a little red.
Red is on, which
Red
is
is not
weird.
turning on. Yeah.
Nothing is no
It is on.
good.
Test. Okay. All right, I'm Brandy Westerman for the record with Portland Solutions. I'm the Emergency Humanitarian Operations Director. So to speak to the various alternative shelter sites or outdoor shelter sites, they are operating at close to 100% at any given point in time. So we have very few vacancies, and generally if an individual moves off the site, there's just a period of 1 to 3 days or so to clean out the unit and have somebody else move in. They're in very high demand.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, Commissioner Alvarado.
Ruben Alvarado for the record. I'm just curious about the burden of the conditional use permit. I guess it's a two-part, like the burden versus the public benefit of a conditional use permit and its purpose. So like, it seems like we're wanting to lax the requirement of a conditional use permit, and my understanding of it is to be able to mitigate whatever negative uses of a specific land use. And so I'm just curious what is the burden and the purpose of decreasing that burden, and then the second part of the benefit of it.
I think JP has a slide to show us that, but while we're waiting for the slide to come up, a conditional use is a land use review. So it's an application an applicant needs to make to the city, and there are approval criteria, and it's a discretionary land use review. The approval criteria are A, physical compatibility, B, livability, which means that the proposal will not have significant adverse impacts on the livability of nearby residential zone land due to noise, glare, late night operation, odors, litter, privacy, and safety concerns. And then public services, which is the main one, is the the transportation system, and if there's enough transportation infrastructure. And then public services of water, police, and fire protection. And those are basically the ones that apply. It would be a type 3 Oh, so there they are. Thank you.
They're up, yeah, they're on
Approval
the screen
criteria.
here.
And a type 3 review, which is for a new conditional use. That means staff makes a recommendation to the hearings officer who holds a hearing. And I think we have the cost there too.
Yeah, the cost is approximately $40,000 for a type 3 conditional use. Timeline is 6 to 8 months. Sandra went through the approval criteria. So it's a fairly high burden to have to go through that conditional use. And there's some other things also. There's in industrial zones, the conditional use has some additional criteria that make it even harder for a shelter to be sited in an industrial zone because it has to be on land that's not identified as being vacant on the buildable lands inventory. So there's an even higher burden for industrially zoned land. Does that answer your question, or is there?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. That's really helpful. And I'm curious, is there a way that we're still maintaining the public benefit of the conditions of the use, or mitigate whatever impacts would
Yeah,
happen?
we gave that some thought, and because the conditional use, I guess the question that we were wondering is, the value of the conditional use, what would be the conditions of approval that might come out of that in terms of mitigation? Are they already being addressed in other ways? And so all of these, as far as I know, all of them, I know that Multnomah Village has, there's good neighbor agreements in place that are basically agreements that have the same sort of mitigating things that we would put in a conditional use that talk about hours of operation and noise and glare. And I know at Multnomah Village, there's the good neighbor agreement, and there's also a community, I forget exactly what it's called, but a community group that is the neighborhood, and there's a school that's relatively close. And so they are on, there's a community committee that works with the city, and that's who the good neighbor agreement is between, and they meet monthly. I think Lottie could talk more about that. That's where I heard that they meet monthly. So to get to your point is that there's that way of addressing it or the conditional use, and we felt like going through the conditional use doesn't really get us anything more than what's already happening.
Thank you.
Commissioners, Patricia Diefendorf for the record. I'm wondering if it might be helpful to hear from Portland Solutions about the Good Neighbor Agreement and some of these practices, just to give you a little bit more insight into that. And I would also potentially invite them, if you think this is appropriate, to speak to a little bit to what it means to serve, to have the shelters have more of these units, and how they have adapted their practices to be able to serve more individuals at a shelter site. So I think this is one of the reasons we wanted to have them here, in case you wanted to hear some of those insights. So I'm hoping that we could maybe allow them some time to describe that a little bit.
Hi, everyone. For the record, my name is Lottie Porter. So to speak to the community engagement process around all of our shelters, I do want to clarify first, not every single shelter that we currently operate has a good neighbor agreement, but every single shelter does have identical good neighbor commitments that come automatically with having a city-run shelter in their community. So that can include a variety of livability-related items. That can mean we work with that community. I have relationships with community leaders and community members throughout the city that are close to shelters. If there's a particularly if they're having a particular issue related to camping, if they're having behavioral issues related to the shelter, if there's public safety concerns, they will reach out to me or to our shelter services inbox. And we will work with them to figure out and problem solve what a potential solution might be. One example we had recently, we have been, I think at the last hearing, I heard that some of the neighbors of the Multnomah Safe Rest Village brought up concerns related to lighting. We've been working with that community for a while on that particular issue, and we walked with neighbors as well as staff from the shelter, as well as staff from Portland Solutions, both the operations coordinator and my colleague Hendrik Bergelschen walked around the site to figure out what can we safely turn off that would both mitigate light-related impacts to the shelter while also allowing for safe operations on site, allowing the shelter operator to see around all corners and to be aware of what's happening in the vicinity of the shelter. Additionally, we also have, as I mentioned, the shelter services inbox, so folks have a regular point of contact. I take a lot of pride in the fact that we usually get back to people within 24 hours if they do have a question. We also maintain all shelter operators by contract are required to maintain they're required to have guidelines for all participants to come into shelter. That includes information on, quiet hours, not maintaining, not littering in neighborhoods, just general good neighbors behavior that we'd expect from any community member in any part of our city. So, not all of our shelters have that formalized negotiated good neighbor agreement where we would sit down and work with stakeholders from a community on a document, but we are committed to and present in all of our neighborhoods to solve and problem solve for impacts that come up if related to shelter. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. But I think the main points that you all are concerned about is, yes, we do work with neighborhoods and are committed to continuing to work with neighborhoods where shelters are present.
Yeah, if you'd like, I can share a little bit of information about operations, especially as some of the sites are larger. We have just over 2 years now of experience with those sites, over 100 units. There's a couple of things that come with that, and I think the biggest one is more staffing on site. We've found a number of economies of scale related to some of the larger sites, operating anything from the utilities to the case management, kind of as we reach a larger scale, that becomes more cost effective, frankly. But we look to staff at a ratio of a minimum of 25-1, and that's 25 individuals rather than units. I know we're talking about units now, but some units do accommodate more than one person. So the staffing ratio is 25-1 at a minimum for general operations, and that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. In addition to that, there's a case management ratio that is additional staff that are present on site, usually during daytime and sometimes evening hours. And their ratio tends to be 15-1 to provide that more robust, like wraparound services. Larger sites mean more staff on site. That means more staff to address issues as they arise, more staff available to kind of work with individuals as they need that, and to just kind of generally manage the space in an effective way. And so that we found that to be very helpful in these larger sites. And I think the reality is that we're facing reductions in budget across the board for homeless services. And as a result of that, looking for those economies of scale is a really important part of kind of how we design these for the future.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much for being here and offering that operational insight. I have a question about the additional amenities and whether those will need to be scaled up as the number of units. So specifically restroom, kitchen, cooking facilities, community gathering space, et cetera. How do you approach that?
Absolutely. So with any larger site, we're going to see more restrooms, more showers, more laundry facilities in particular. So those, generally, they're containerized. We try to hit a ratio of 15-1 for restrooms, and most of the restrooms are accompanied with a shower. We do at times also add some additional porta potties on site that wouldn't have, obviously, that shower facility alongside it. So that definitely comes at larger numbers as we're increasing. In terms of the kitchen piece of that, generally cooking is not done on the shelter sites. So our shelter operators contract for prepared meals, which are then heated up at the site rather than a full service kitchen. And so obviously additional freezer space, additional oven space is required when we look at larger numbers and more people requiring that food service. But it's not a full kitchen service. Gathering spaces are built into every site design. Sometimes a site such as the Multnomah Safe Rest Village or the Clinton Triangle is able to benefit from an indoor space where gathering and meeting can take place. There's a building on site in addition to the outdoor shelter facilities. At other times, it's a covered outdoor space that's made available for gathering spaces and just kind of community
Yeah. Vice Chair Thompson.
Yes, thank you again for being here. This is really helpful. Some of the testimony that we received indicated that neighbors felt that the group was out of compliance with the Good Neighbors Agreement, and I was just curious to hear more from you about compliance. I don't know how Good Neighbors agreements are set up, but if you could comment and provide your assessment of that, that would be great.
Yeah, so good neighbor agreements are non-legally binding agreements. Basically, what we are committing to as a city is that we will work with neighbors when there are issues. We will commit to meeting monthly at a community advisory committee meeting. We will, answer emails as necessary. We will make sure that operators are in compliance with what's in their contract, which includes having a way to contact the shelter. That includes helping report issues when they are outside the fence of the shelter. And that is what we are committing to. I think, and I hear that neighbors are frustrated with how things are at the shelter right now. However, based on what's written within the Good Neighbor Agreement, we are currently following the guidelines that we set up. A Good Neighbor Agreement, at the end of the day, is a communication structure that is negotiated with the community to figure out if they do have issues, where and how they can escalate them, and that is included within the Good Neighbor Agreement document.
Other questions? I'm curious, when we're talking about scaling, separate from amenities, there's also I'm curious what you've seen in terms of, is there any differentiation between size of Safe Rest Village and successful movement into permanent housing? Because I think that's fundamentally what we're all going towards, right?
Housing is always the objective, so I appreciate that question and thank you for bringing that up. The answer to that is a bit more complex than size of the Safe Rest Village. The case management, we believe, is an essential component to supporting people on navigating that next step in their journey. And there are a number of other factors that play in terms of like availability of resources for kind of health and human services, as well as like rental assistance housing supports that determine the success rate for placements into housing. So I don't see a direct correlation between the size. I think those other factors play bigger in terms of whether, a site is successfully helping people transition to housing.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that, part of the complexity here is differentiating, like we have one set of levers, and obviously this is an issue that requires a lot of levers to being aligned. Land use doesn't have a lot in terms of operation, ongoing operation or maintenance, or the human support of that. Other questions, thoughts? Yeah.
I have just two more perfunctory questions. For the purposes of the zoning code, is a site based on contiguous ownership or is it property line?
Oh, that's a good question.
Sorry, what was the question? Sorry.
Is a site contiguous ownership or is it
Yes.
property? Okay,
It's
thank you.
contiguous ownership.
And then for the EG and industrial zones, the existing shelters are allowed if on publicly owned land, based on whenever this goes into effect. Does that fix the number of shelters that are allowed on those, or what, is there any?
As it's
limit?
written, it doesn't cap it, no.
Okay, so there's no effective cap on, okay, thank you.
Anything? Okay, every time you're, I'm like, oh, do you have something? No.
And can I clarify one other thing?
please.
And correct me if I'm wrong. There's no cap on the EG for existing shelters, but if you look at Table 2, the city-owned ones, there are none that are zoned EG. Look at Table 3, there are 2. Oh, no, there's one that's zoned EG, the Kenton Women's Village, and it has 19. So, and I think that's been part of the conversation. We're used to regulating development that's for profit, and a lot of people want to build, so we put, rules around that. In this case, it's not a situation where we have a lot of private developers wanting to build shelters and offer wraparound services, for example, that Portland Solutions is hiring to do. So there's limited, I don't want to say demand, because there's a lot of demand, but there's limited providers and people in this space wanting to expand shelters or provide shelters. And I think that's what we're looking for, is some, flexibility of what we've learned in the last, few years when we did the shelter to housing continuum. I don't even think we had the word outdoor shelter. We had to define
Yeah, it was
it.
in
We were
there.
like, what are these? Are they campgrounds? Are they mass shelters? And so in that project that when we were refreshing our memory, we had to define these different things, because mass shelters are in buildings. These outdoor shelters are sometimes tents, sometimes little structures. And so I think that was some of the questions that we had last time about, like, why do we keep coming back and changing the rules? It's because we're learning. We've had to define these things, and operations have changed. And unfortunately, our housing emergency hasn't.
I will say, I really appreciated the difference of tables and seeing as examples, what is currently allowed, what would be proposed, and also how, what the process of conditional use is. So I appreciate our questions. Anything else before we move on? I don't think this is a shift this is not an amendment. Is that correct?
Well, I think a couple of you were interested in potentially proposing an amendment specifically to address some of the testimony you heard. So in Table 1, that would be the commercially zoned sites, which we are proposing to go from 60 to 200 as the threshold. The idea we had, if you wanted to propose an amendment, was to only increase from 60 to 200 for the EX zoned sites, which there is only one shelter on an EX zone site, and it's a Clinton Triangle, which on all sides has right-of-way and is at least 300 feet from a residential zone. So, and that's the largest one too. It has 160 individual shelters currently. And of course, the FAR for EX is quite high. So that's an option for you if you wanted to allow for the EX zone one to be legalized, given those circumstances, and to go to 200 and then maintain or increase the 60 to 100 for other commercially zoned sites instead of going from 60 to 200.
Yeah, Commissioner Knowles?
So just to clarify, you have put this into the amendment that's here in the memo.
Yep.
Correct.
So the amendment now, I've put up the language that we're proposing here. So there's no change to what we're proposing here in the outdoor shelters I apologize. There's one, nope, there's no change here. This is the existing code or we would be changing it to 100. So the difference is that, okay, it's the second
next.
one. Yeah, there we go. That's why I'm confused. Okay, so the difference here is that we've proposed in the current code, or the current proposal is for just 200 broadly for all of the commercial zones and the EX zone. And so as Sandra said, it would pull out the commercial zones, the CI2 zone, and instead of increasing, which is 3A1, instead of increasing that to 200, which is what's in the proposal now, we would only increase that to 100 shelters in those zones, and then the 200 outdoor shelter is only in the EX zone.
But my question was, if we wanted to move this amendment, we can do that
Oh,
today,
Correct.
right?
yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
Just what
Yeah.
I'm trying to get straight. Should I do that, or? but there are
Well,
more
and we can make a motion and continue discussion.
Okay, well, I'll move the staff recommendation.
Okay, great. Is there a second?
Can I clarify, is that a staff recommendation for that amendment? Or is it for the benefit of us?
It was the idea that we came up with that could, for a potential amendment.
I think, Commissioners, I would just say that we're putting that proposal in front of you for your consideration. I think staff's recommendation is still the proposal that was submitted as part of the staff proposal. I think you've heard, just to summarize really quickly, I think you've heard that there is, growing experience, there's limited places to locate these shelters. We are learning as a city how to accommodate these shelters at larger scales and provide the services and the amenities and the supports. There's economies that we've heard about, the economies of scale that we achieve by having some larger shelters. And I think predominantly, I think about the fact that there's not so many locations where these sites can be located. And so I think the staff proposal is still the proposal that is before the commission. We offered this as an option in the event that the commission is looking for an alternative. And so we would like you to sort of deliberate on that in that context.
Clarifying. So there's a motion on the
I
table.
guess
Is
it's
there a
not the
second?
staff recommendation now.
It is, it's like,
The idea they had.
And one other thing that I think is important to think, 100 limit for the commercial zones means that the Multnomah Village site would be maxed out.
Right.
So in talking with our colleagues from Portland Solutions, they were saying, sharing the 25 to 1 individuals. So there's alternatives, right? If you wanted to do 100 or 125, because that's one extra staff person for ongoing services, 150, 175, we would at least encourage you to stay within 25-person increments, I believe.
Commissioner Spivak.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I mean, I think this is in response to public testimony. Even though it's all about zoning categories, looking it up, it would allow the site that's 185 to go to 200. It would cap Multnomah at 100. The other affected properties are Menlo Park, Wheeler, Nato, Upper Lodge, and Oak Street. Those are the other properties that are I'm getting confused now. They're the ones that will be capped at 100, the C-zone sites. And Menlo Park, is at 70 right now, according to the report. I'm guessing it's geographically constrained to go beyond that, just as that's an old TriMet. Is that not right? So it could go beyond 100 if it were, I'm trying to think what's materially impacted by this amendment. And I'm trying to figure out if it's any site other than Multnomah.
Yeah, so there's a Menlo Park site that's at the Menlo Park Park and Ride. So there is additional space in that location because it's a very large parking lot, basically, where the village exists. It's in the process of expanding to 75.
Can I just clarify, pardon me, with staff, where those modifications that are being discussed would not affect the CM, would it affect the CM3?
It would,
Yes.
it would affect all of the C zones.
It would affect all of the C zones
Yes.
and just not the EG.
The one
Okay.
that would be basically separate would be EX. So that's,
Sorry,
unless
EX,
it's the
that's-
Clinton Triangle that has 160 now, and so that would be the cap, the one that is net, would be capped at 200.
So this change would potentially have the impact on other sites as well. It's just that those sites are not
At
those
100.
levels yet.
Yes.
Yeah, at those levels of units, yeah.
We had talked about how there were some ways that the Multnomah Village, Safe Rest Village was unique. So I'm curious to hear why this 100 cap didn't just apply to CM2 and why it was all C zones.
Right. Oh, and I'm just actually going to pause for parliamentary. We do have a motion on the floor. Is there a second for this specific?
I'm trying to clarify.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay, okay.
that's-
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Thank you.
Well, it's,
Trying to figure out where we're at.
let's see, there are a couple of other CM2 zones that are in the privately operated ones, but basically we were just trying to pull out the one that is larger, where there is room, the places that are large and have room to grow, which is EX. I guess there's not, we were thinking of the commercial zones as being more like each other than the EX zone, but I don't know.
Vice Chair Thompson, I think one of the biggest differences was the distance from residential, right? I think what we were pointing out, particularly in Table 2, is the fact that the Multnomah Village, Safe Rest Village, is the one that has proximity to residential, whereas all the others do not. So that was one big difference.
Vice Chair O'Meara, for the record, I second the motion and I'm kicking off deliberation.
Thank you.
I have a question around what is the demand for new outdoor shelter units and how would this amendment impact the ability to deliver on that demand?
Yeah, so the question about demand is a bit of a policy question. So when it comes to the individuals who are experiencing homelessness, there's a high demand. It's a desirable form of shelter. And what we see is that the current supply is far below what could be utilized and what people experiencing homelessness would like to have available to them. When it comes to the policy level of that decision, at this point in time, we do not have any direction to increase the supply of kind of village-style shelters or the outdoor shelters. That can change, and we know that that has changed in the 2 years that I've been with the city. We've seen quite a few significant changes in the type of shelter that the city has been moving towards. So I want to keep that kind of debate open about what that could look like in the future. But at this time, there's no plans to expand either the existing footprints or to increase the number of shelters that we're operating.
Just to add to that, though, I mean, we are not the only organization that is building alternative shelter. A lot of the shelters marked on the privately operated list are operated by our partners over at the Homeless Services Department within Multnomah County that are still building a variety of different shelters, including alternative shelter. And these coding changes would not just affect our ability to build shelter, but partner organizations who are facing a similar level of demand for services.
Other thoughts, questions?
Can I interject about a different topic, just because I see you all struggling? Before we came into this meeting room, we got an email from our colleagues at Portland Planning and Development, and they are reviewing an institutional, this has nothing to do with shelters. They are reviewing a permit, and they thought, oh, could one of the items that a completely different item, which is item, what, MP 12, I believe.
TA 12.
TA 12.
Oh, is it?
No, MP 12. Completely different item. Oh, should this applicant wait until recap 11 goes into effect? Because I think they'll be able to use one of the provisions that we have proposed in here. And so they were looking at our code language and discovered that perhaps we should be amending the code in a different way. And so we were on our way here. We were like, oh my gosh, this is a lot to digest. Do we propose it as an amendment or not? We have recap 11 on our next meeting agenda. And so we didn't know how this conversation about shelters was going to go. So if you would like another 2 weeks to think about how you individually are landing with all of this information, I know we got you the memo last week, but I don't know how much time you've had to digest. And we would like you not to take a vote on the whole package today anyway, because we want to have a conversation with this colleague about that issue of what we're amending. So that could buy you 2 weeks in your own thinking. I sort of didn't want to say anything because I want you to make a decision on shelters, but but in the interest of transparency, I thought I'd mention that right now.
Would 2 weeks percolation be helpful on this particular point, or? I'm seeing Commissioner Pollack have a very strong feeling.
I would be in support of going with the staff's recommendation to keep 200 in C zone for shelters. I would also like 2 weeks more to maybe learn more about it. I heard from staff that they aren't planning currently any major expansions, but that they would like the option to in the future if needed. So I would kind of like more time to just think about it and come back to it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Spivak?
I think I'm in a similar position, but this conversation has got me thinking about.
Could you, yeah,
Oops.
make,
I think I'm in a similar position, but this discussion got me thinking about buffering, because you said the word buffering. And I looked up in these zones, I think the setback's like in terms of the distance from residential property. If I read it right, it's 5-foot setback, which I could see that there may be that on a large site, the setback might be more important than the number of people. And there might be some argument for looking at the setback as a way of addressing the concerns we heard from neighbors. They would apply to other sites as well, where there's a shelter abutting a residential use.
okay. Is anyone opposed to percolating for a couple of weeks on this? Okay, I'll say I, for one, would very much like to be able to hear Commissioner Brandon's thoughts on it as well. So, okay. So how about let us table that for our next, and thank you, and I'm sorry, Sandra, for taking the bone that you just threw us.
Chair Routh,
Yes,
Patricia Diefendorfer for the record. I just want to clarify because I think I was not 100% clear on the motion on the table right now, even though we're going to table it for now. Can we clarify, was there a motion to actually amend per that staff?
Idea.
That was my
Idea.
understanding, that it's that the, accepting the idea as an amendment to the staff amendment.
The
Yes,
staff,
that was
staff
my
proposal?
intention.
That's correct. Okay, that was.
And that
my
was what was
understanding.
seconded?
Yes.
Okay, just clarifying that.
So that has been discussed, and we will now table. And I'll have to remember that.
Yes. And I would encourage you also to, if you have other ideas or want to talk to us or something, we can write something else up for your next discussion too. Looks like we'll probably have a new memo, probably with, maybe we'll call this Amendment 6, that's on the table, that we're tabling right now, and potentially the one that we need to check in with our colleagues from PP&D about.
I'm also hearing maybe a suggestion on the part of Commissioner Spivak to look at whether a greater setback would be.
Yes, I'm curious if that would help, might be a middle ground between the proposed draft, unamended, and what neighbors have been bringing up.
So we can go ahead and maybe just add that into the mix and take a look at that.
I would also be interested in an option that just looks at CM2 zone as opposed to the broader sweeping C zone that would impact several of the other sites.
Great, yeah, Commissioner Alvarado.
I think related to my previous questions, I'd be interested to kind of have a little bit more information about the mitigation factors and in lieu of conditional use permits, and being able to do that, to have some assurance for neighbors that these are the things that take place. I know my understanding was that good neighbor agreements are not legally binding. And so are conditional use permits legally binding, and is there a difference there? And I'm just a little bit unsure as to how to, I guess, navigate between those two, the usefulness of it and the burden. And so I'm just be a little bit more, would require just a little bit more information and making sure that we're mitigating accordingly.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for joining us, staff from Portland Solutions, and I'm sorry that you don't have the satisfaction of us coming to a, but we are trying to be deliberative. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
And we'll continue this too.
Yes, we will continue this to October 28th.
Thank you.
So much. And now, let us bring up the second. Once again, in our usual format, we have given short shrift to Jeff Cottle and Daniel Subbing by at least 20 minutes. And this time for the Comprehensive Plan Environmental and Watershed Health Project. Thank you both so much for being here. Sorry and
Commissioners,
thanks.
pardon me, Commissioners, just to, while they're getting ready to, this is an informational briefing, right? This is kind of, yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that. This is an informational briefing. It's really more of a training to get the commission up to speed on the environmental chapter of the comprehensive plan in preparation for the Columbia Corridor Industrial Lands project that the commission will be seeing in the near future.
Okay, well, I'll begin to share the PowerPoint, but I'll just introduce myself. So I'm Jeff Cottle. I use he, him pronouns. I am the manager of the River Environmental Team at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability.
And my name is Daniel Sobing. I'm an environmental planner on Jeff's team.
So yes, for some of you, this will be a little bit of a repeat. It looks like I'm disabled from sharing. Okay. Somehow it was 2 years ago, like 2.5 years ago, that we did this same training somehow, or information session. Okay, here we go. Try to make sure that they're on the slideshow. No. Oh, there we go. Okay, so considering time, we'll try to get through this as quickly as possible. It really is just our attempt to try to explain the comprehensive plan, but also generally how we work within sort of environmental planning. Again, long-range planning, we look out, 20 years usually in a lot of our planning projects. So really, we are tasked with determining what regulations apply and how we are managing development to minimize impacts on natural resources. So here's the agenda. Just quickly, the context, like most of our work, is within the statewide planning goals. We'll go quickly over those. Again, try to quickly review what are the key components of Chapter 7, which focus on the environment and watershed health. And then Daniel will go through how we use the natural resource inventory, which supports our application of the environmental zones. And then a little bit about environmental zones, and then we'll just have a quick intro to some projects that are coming up, because this really is, I think, preparing all of you especially for the Columbia Corridor and Industrial Lands project, but there's another project at the North Reach we want to just highlight really quickly. So statewide planning goals, really there are 3 that guide our work. There's goal 15, so when the statewide planning goals were adopted, the legislature determined that the Willamette River was so important it needed to have its own goal, so we planned for that specifically. Generally, the rest of our environmental resources, in addition, you can see scenic and historic fall under Goal 5, and then Goal 7, which is really specific to natural hazards, which we also contribute to in terms of our planning. So the main part about Goal 5 is, and as compared to Goal 15 as compared to Goal 5, is that Goal 15 really recognizes the diversity of the uses that are along the Willamette River, and you can see, so it is natural, historic, scenic, agricultural, economic, all of those things, and we can see it in the Willamette River here in the city, where we have the industrial portions that are really on the northern stretch, and then much more kind of open space, et cetera, that's in the South Reach area. We have broken the Willamette River into 3 reaches, as many of you are familiar with, in the central cities between those 2. So we actually have separate regulations that apply to those, which would basically the Greenway overlay zones. We won't go into the details on that too much today. We'll really focus more on the environmental zones, but we have specific requirements that apply to the Willamette. like I said, goal 5 is specifically looking at essentially everything else, all the other natural areas in the city, and we apply it throughout the city. And it's really, the aim here is more about conservation and protection of those natural resources in addition to scenic views, historic areas and things like that. So goal 7, as the name implies, really about the variety of natural hazards. So really specifically about protection of people from natural hazard and people and property from natural hazards. So floodplains, steep slopes, landslides, wildfire. So these are all pieces that we aim to address in various forms within where we apply environmental zones. So then in the comprehensive plan, like I said, chapter 7, the environment and watershed health. So again, the components, there are, for all of these different chapters, we have our vision and our guiding principles, and then goals and policies, and then supporting documents. And so for us, we obviously have the goals and policies that are specific to how we manage natural resources in the environment, and then our key supporting document that really underlies a lot of our work is the natural resource inventory, and like I said, we'll go through what that's all about. So chapter 7, within chapter 7, there are 5 goals ranging from, they address a wide range of different considerations. So the first goal is really about climate and really about carbon emissions. That's not something that we, although we contribute to that, we, in terms of planning, aren't focused too much on the carbon emission side. That's more on the sustainability side of BPS. Goal 7B is really watershed health and the environment. Really, as you would imagine, it's about maintaining and preserving ecosystem services and functions, sort of what we traditionally think about in terms of natural resource protection and maintaining them over time. Resilience, which we play more of a role as compared to the kind of carbon issues. This is really about how we build and how we manage natural resources to ensure that over time we are resilient in the face of climate change and natural hazards. 7D, really looking at environmental equity and making sure that we make decisions. Those burdens are lessened in terms of how, again, natural hazards and environmental contamination for previously historically underrepresented communities. And then the role of the community in stewardship is 7E, really, that Portlanders are actively engaged in these types of protections of the environment and watershed health. So under those different goals, I'm not going to go into the specific policies, but really there's 3 groupings of policies. One, really looking at environmental quality and resilience, planning for natural resource protection, which we do, and then specific policies related to how we address natural resources in development situations. Within those policies, we break them down into our watershed-specific areas. So the Columbia, the Willamette, the Columbia Slough, Johnson Creek, and then Fano and Tryon. So Fano and Tryon in the southwest portion. So this is our map of where, if you're unfamiliar for some of those smaller ones, maybe Fano and Tryon. These are the watersheds within the city and within our urban services boundary that we plan for and where we implement the comprehensive plan. And with that, on that sort of basic stuff, I don't know, we could answer a few questions if there's anything that comes up, but otherwise we'll just move over to more of the technical side, which is the natural resources inventory. Okay, I'll hand it over to Daniel.
All right, again, Daniel Sobing, BPS, environmental planner. I'll start to dig into the technical nitty-gritty, and I'll start with the natural resource inventory, which is a document that was adopted by City Council in 2012. This is one of the background documents that are foundational to the comprehensive plan. It's a methodology for mapping natural resources, and it also contains a methodology for ranking natural resources based on the riparian resource values and wildlife values. And so we have been protecting natural resources in the city of Portland going back to the late 1980s. So our earliest natural resource protection plans were adopted in the Columbia Corridor. And then we planned for the rest of the city of Portland through most of the 1990s. And did some additional planning to do some revisions to those natural resource protections into the 2000s. And we're continuing today to revise and update our natural resource protection. So this has been an ongoing project to protect resources in Portland, and it will continue going forward. And talking strictly about Goal 5, which applies, again, outside of that Greenway boundary. So other than those Goal 15 resources that apply to the Willamette, we're generally using Goal 5 to define how we are protecting and mapping natural resources. And there's a specific methodology that's laid out in the rules and regulations that the state has adopted around Goal 5. So we are required to define natural resource sites, a geographic area that could consist of one tax lot or many tax lots. Once we define a resource site, we take an inventory of the natural resources that are contained therein. We determine the significance of those resources. Then we do an economic, social, environmental, and energy analysis to determine which of those significant resources should be allowed to be developed and which should be protected from development. And then we make a protection decision based on that ESEE analysis. And so the basics of how the NRI works is we start with a digital inventory of natural resources. So on this slide, we have water features. So you have streams, water bodies, wetlands, and flood areas are basically our water features in the natural resource inventory. And then overlaid on top of that here, we show our vegetation mapping and steep slope mapping. So we also map patches of forest vegetation, woodland vegetation, shrubland vegetation, and herbaceous. And then we use LiDAR terrain mapping to determine where steep slopes are. And the breakpoint that we use is 25%. So any slope that's steeper than 25%, we define as a steep slope. And then we have a computer model, a couple of different computer models, one that identifies riparian resources. So it's a buffer analysis that determines proximity to streams or wetlands or water bodies, and then looks for whether there is vegetation within those buffers. And then we have a separate computerized methodology that determines the wildlife habitat value, and that's looking at the sizes of vegetation patches, the relationship between those patches to other patches of vegetation, and it also takes into account those riparian resources as well. So we have two different methodologies for ranking wildlife habitat and riparian habitat. And then we have a way of, we combine those rankings, so anything that ranks as high or medium in those separate rankings then gets combined. We also have an inventory of special habitat areas, which are areas that are defined as providing habitat for threatened, endangered, or at-risk species. So those two models plus the special habitat areas are combined to create our combined habitat rankings. And this slide is showing pre-2022 environmental overlay zones. So, and the point of this slide was to show that there was kind of a mismatch between the E-zones that were adopted in the 80s and 90s by those earlier natural resource protection plans and the inventory of ranking resources that we had based on that natural resource inventory. So, and we know that there are existing mismatches like this throughout the city, and so it's our task now to try to correct the E-zones and update policy to protect those resources that were left unprotected by E-zones previously in the 80s and 90s. And
Talk a little bit about Title 13.
yeah, actually, that's a good point. So the reason that the NRI was adopted was because as of 2006, Metro adopted Title 13, Nature and Neighborhood. So Portland was found to be in compliance with Goal 5 from as far as the state of Oregon was concerned in the early 2000s. But then Metro came in 2006 and said, we have a new set of regulations. And so all of the jurisdictions within the Metro region, Portland, and all of the cities that are within Clackamas, Washington County, and Multnomah County were then required to also demonstrate compliance with Title 13. And Title 13 came up with a new methodology for mapping riparian resources and wildlife habitat. And so the models that the city of Portland adopted in the NRI were very much based on the methodology that was adopted by Metro. And so we have to demonstrate that we are in compliance with Title 13 by showing that our E-zones are overlapping with those identified riparian resources and wildlife habitat. And so that was kind of a system that Portland adopted to demonstrate compliance with Title 13. And as of 2012, we were determined to be in substantial compliance. So not an exact 100% compliance, but substantially most of those resources were protected by E-zones. But that next slide that shows the mismatch between those E-zones, we're trying to fill those gaps to come more into compliance with Title 13 to fill some of those gaps that have been identified. And so the tool that we use to protect those resources are the environmental overlay zones, and we have several different flavors of those. So the conservation zone and protection zone are the ones that are mapped the most widely throughout the city of Portland. Those are our main tools for complying with Goal 5 as far as natural resource protections. Pleasant Valley Zone is pretty similar to the conservation zone, a little bit more. It's kind of a conservation zone plus. It's a little bit stricter in its regulations, but very similar. Protection zone is kind of the no-build area. It's the overlay that we apply to our most sensitive natural resources. And then within that Goal 15 area, within that greenway, we use the river environmental overlay zone, which is similar to the other E zones, but it's generally most development in the River E goes through a discretionary review process, whereas with the other E zones, a lot of times development could meet standards and avoid discretionary review.
And one note, Pleasant Valley, if you're not aware of that, it's like pretty much furthest southeast Portland out along Johnson Creek area. When we annexed that area, brought it in, we determined specific requirements for the area given its character at the time, which I think is in the 2000s.
Yeah, 2006-ish or 2003, something like that. And the
Commissioners might remember briefly, recently, the urban services boundary that we recently went through, and that's in Pleasant Valley.
Yeah, and I think we downgraded some of that area that we had previously thought was going to urbanize. I think the original plan was that we were going to create a neighborhood center out there. It was going to become an urban center, and it was going to be, because Damascus was developing out far to the southeast of Portland and had incorporated as a city, we thought that there was going to be more demand for development there. That really hasn't materialized, so the urbanization of Pleasant Valley hasn't really moved forward as quickly as we thought. But when that Pleasant Valley zone was adopted, it was adopted with the intention of having people consolidate agricultural parcels, larger parcels, and then subdividing them. And to a large extent, that has remained a rural agricultural area and not really urbanized very much at all. And so some basics about the E-zones, how they work. So the E-zones, they limit the creation of new disturbance areas. They have limits on the removal of trees that are located within those E-zones. They have setback standards from wetlands, streams, and other water bodies. And when there are impacts to natural resources, there are required mitigations to offset those impacts. So if you're developing using the standards, there are site enhancement requirements and tree replacement requirements. If you go through discretionary review, you're required to propose a mitigation plan that is commensurate with the level of the impacts. And again, the two types of environmental overlay zones that are most commonly mapped is the conservation zone, which is the less restrictive, and there are standards and limits on development, but those standards and limits can be reduced or adjusted through the environmental review process. The protection zone is much more restrictive. You really can't adjust. You can't propose variances to those standards within the protection zone unless it's for public development. So for most private development, that protection zone effectively serves as a no-build area. And so the tools that we use to map natural resources are aerial imagery, and we have a pretty good catalog of aerial imagery going back to about 1996, so we can see how resources have been mapped on the ground, where they've grown up and where they've been lost. We also have LiDAR terrain mapping, so we work with our regional partners, other cities, and the Army Corps of Engineers to periodically do flyovers where they shoot lasers down from airplanes and are able to very minutely map natural resources, or at least the terrain of the ground down to about 1 foot squares, so you can see elevation changes foot by foot. And we use that to map streams, so we can identify streams and other features that are hidden beneath the canopy of the trees very precisely. And then we do site visits to ground truth and verify the natural resource mapping. And again, the features that we're mapping are vegetation patches, wetlands, streams, and floodplains. And so this is a comparison. On the left-hand side is a graphic that was from a natural resource protection plan that was adopted in 1994. On the right is an aerial image, or it's not an aerial image, but it's a digital image of the resources that are mapped in that same geographic area that's from our current natural resource inventory. And you can see how much more detail and precision there is in that resource mapping. There are a number of streams that were totally missed in the previous plan, and the vegetation can be mapped to much greater detail than those earlier hand-drawn maps were. And so when we, again, this process of identifying a resource site, mapping the resources, determining significance, going through this ESE analysis, and then determining how to apply E-zones to those features, we have some ways to kind of tweak the proposed natural resource protections to determine what level of protection is adequate for those features. And so there's two kind of, when we have the C and the P zone, there's two kind of levers that we can use. So one is, do we apply the conservation zone to this feature, or do we apply the protection zone to that feature? If it's something that's really significant, really important, it should be a protection zone. If it's an area where we think we should allow some level of development to occur, conservation zone is more appropriate. So we make that decision, or we make proposals about those decisions. And then the other factor that we can tweak is buffer size. So once we apply an E-zone to it, if we apply a larger buffer to it, that's going to set development further back from that feature, or we can apply a smaller buffer and let development happen much closer to that feature if we think that's appropriate.
So with that, we just wanted to quickly kind of start to introduce, although not get into any detail of some of the upcoming projects. You are aware of these, but just a quick kind of intro to, and then we can open up to questions. So just a little bit of history here. This really does cover, in the last, say, 10 years, some of the work that we have done. We, as a part of the Central City 2035 plan, we updated the regulations in the Central City on the Willamette, and then the South Reach plan updated the basically area south of the Ross Island Bridge, and then through the project that Daniel was talking about, E-zone map correction project, that was most of the rest of the city, those Goal 5 resources that are in the environmental zone. We, as a part of that, pulled out the industrial land, again, as most of you are aware, and that's part of this project that we'll talk about here in a sec, the Columbia Corridor project. But then in the interim between those two, we also adopted the floodplain resilience plan, and I'll tell you a little bit more just context on our floodplain work. And so we are working on the Columbia Corridor and industrial lands E-zone project, and then in the future, we're ramping up as we have been sort of working on existing things on the North Reach plan. I just wanted to give a little bit of introduction to that. So the Columbia Corridor Industrial Lands E-zone project, like we said, basically these are all the properties, all the sites that were left out of the E-zone map correction project because of the considerations with the economic opportunities analysis. So mostly in the corridor, a site on Johnson Creek, Freeway Lands, if you're familiar with it, and then some others that are at the kind of periphery of the north reach of the Willamette, where it comes to where we apply other E-zones, but are not currently don't have E-zones. And again, we're not going to get into details because you'll get to the details here in the coming months. But really, the proposal is would modify the application of the environmental overlay zones, and fundamentally there were just some questions, especially within the context of the industrial lands. What are the right protections, and what are the buffers and things like that that Daniel had mentioned. We will have some zoning code amendments, but really it's not a whole lot of zoning code amendments. Many of the code amendments that were envisioned to be part of this process were actually pulled off into the public infrastructure E-zone code project, which we've already, you have all seen. And as I said, this project, the Columbia Corridor Industrial Lands project, is really, we're coordinating and working together with the economic opportunities analysis, because the decisions we make as a part of this project inform industrial capacity. And so really, as you're aware, we're kind of moving at the same time, and they are feeding into one another in terms of what are the implications of the decisions that we make. So just quickly, what we will be coming forth with the project to you is this question, revisiting this slide that we had, is really, what are those zones that we apply? How big are those buffers? And we currently have 3 different scenarios that address these different considerations in terms of what's applied and where. Just so you know, we released a discussion draft. I think it was mentioned earlier, but we released a discussion draft in September. We are currently doing public outreach and doing meetings at open houses and things like that. As was mentioned earlier, November 10th is the deadline for that public input. We have a briefing on December 2nd on the CCIL and EOA, and then the plan is to release the proposed draft on the 8th, and then we would go through hearing and work sessions early in 2026. And then, so I just wanted to briefly revisit, and again, many of you have already had this sort of information before, but the other part that's really driving a lot of our work is floodplain updates. We've been working across multiple bureaus in response to this biological opinion that was for the National Flood Insurance Program, released in 2016, so it's FEMA's National Flood Insurance Program, and they had to consult with NOAA Fisheries, and NOAA Fisheries determined that the flood insurance program impacted threatened and endangered species 16 in the state of Oregon. And since 2016, they've been working to determine how they're going to respond to that and what changes they're going to make. And so the city of Portland, we have been working on our response to their response so that we could be prepared and make sure that our regulations were consistent with what requirements that are going to come down. And so there are basically 3 areas that are addressed. Really, it's about habitat, the things that we usually think of as habitat, trees and vegetation, flood storage, which is making sure that you have enough with development, you continue to have capacity for floodwaters to be transmitted down a waterway, and then stormwater management, which is basically for us managed through our stormwater management manual. And so the take home is FEMA recently released their draft EIS for their response to the biological opinion. The public process just closed last week, I think. And so the assumption is that within the next 6 to 12 months, however long it takes, they will finalize an approach. And then all the jurisdictions, there's basically over 250 jurisdictions in Oregon will have to comply with those changes to be consistent with the changes that are made as a part of the in response to the biological opinion. So you've also seen this before, but this was, we basically starting in 2019, but we have updated this work plan from for a citywide perspective. 8 different bureaus and their bureau directors have signed on to this work plan as a stepwise process, again, as we've been moving with the understanding that compliance would be required of us, that we, especially in recognition of our zoning code and the different requirements that apply in different places, we have been implementing this stepwise process, as you can see here. So we have the Columbia Corridor Industrial Lands Project, which will incorporate floodplain requirements, and then the North Reach will be the next stop. I'm not going to get into details of that, but basically revisiting what we had previously adopted a North Reach plan in 2010. And actually, I do have a slide about it, but anyhow, so then the other pieces, other parts of the city, the building regulations, that piece about flood storage, as you again are familiar with, is actually managed through and overseen by permitting and development, site development. So it's part of the building regulations, the building code. And then we have also been working on mitigation banks and other floodplain restoration efforts across the city to try to make sure that we can take credit basically for that uplift. Really briefly, again, not going to get into the details of this. We will talk about this, I'm sure, a little bit later after the CCIL gets through. But really what we're looking to do in the North Reach is, number one, still continue to support river-dependent, river-related industrial uses there, and more generally, economic development. Apply new environmental regulations that would be consistent with what's applied in the Central City and South Reach, although tailored to the industrial development of the North Reach. And also specifically from a zoning code perspective, develop standards and other things that will be tailored specifically to industrial development so that hopefully they don't need to go through land use review for approval all the time, and there are ways in which we can structure the code to allow for quicker approval of industrial development, and then, as we discussed, incorporating the floodplain requirements that we have already applied in the central and south reach to the north reach as well. And with that, we can open it for questions.
Commissioner Spivak.
Thank you. I am interested in standards, and I know that housing has a special place in where you have to be able to create needed housing through standard, clear, and objective processes. Does the state require the city to allow industrial facilities, transmission, no, not transmission, but like other kind of things through a standards process? Or is that something Portland, if you follow what you just said there, Portland might try and create a standards process voluntarily? Like, does it make sense, this question?
Yeah. So, well, one thing, just on the housing side, we are required to have clear and objective, and we do have it in the river overlay zone. That's one thing, actually, in the Greenway overlay zone, which is applied to the North Reach. We don't currently have. There's not a lot of residential there, so it doesn't really come up that much. As far as I know, there's no requirement for us to do anything to have clear and objective for industrial. We are looking, I think, really the aim of the project, one of the aims of the project is to better meet the needs of industrial, and in general to make the process more efficient and specifically more consistent with what we do elsewhere. The Greenway overlay zone right now is just really outdated, but I think we are going into the project. We have these two different main kind of areas of focus, which really is, we recognize that there's marine industrial, and we have said that that is our priority there. And how are we updating the code to respond to that while also applying, again, environmental regulations that specifically address known natural resources that are in the inventory and applying regulations to those. So we are doing to do our best to try to balance those two things and hopefully at least make the process especially easier for industrial property owners.
I like to hear that. I mean, I generally think the things that we need, there should be a by right way of doing it. And we don't just need housing, we need some of this other stuff too. And this has come up with transmission as well, obviously. We need a certain amount of transmission. Those projects sometimes go to LUBA routinely because there's no clear and objective path. So that's good to hear.
And I think in general, the replacement, we have been working toward a retirement of the Greenway overlay zone that we did try again in 2010. We had the North Reach plan. It was actually the first river overlay zone tried to be applied there. But a big part of that is the recognition of trying to modernize. Even in some of the South Shore District and things like that, it was originally a lot of the zoning was focused on land use review. When it came to environmental reviews. And we have over time moved to where we are trying to establish more standards in general to allow for things to be approved while still meeting our goals and the intent of environmental protection, but not always requiring land use review in the process and cost of that.
And I think regarding transmission lines, I think the big high-profile case that came up recently about PGE trying to put their lines through in Forest Park, there is a Forest Park natural resource protection plan that's, it's related to E-zones, but it's kind of separate. It's really just related to Forest Park, and it's probably the most restrictive environmental regulations in the city. And it's something that was adopted in 1995 and has not really been revisited since then. So that was kind of a unique situation where they were opening up this specific district plan that is just very, very restrictive in terms of what's allowed and how discretionary review happens in those situations.
Commissioner Knowles?
One comment. I never imagined that I'd get to work on the Willamette River Greenway twice in my life. Those maps you showed from the Southwest Resources Plan, hand-drawn.
Yeah.
The technology has gone a long way, fortunately.
Yeah, and for us, there's...
So thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, there are a few staff who have worked, and I guess our director now has previously, I think, may have been involved in North Reach. But yes, there are a few that still are left that are going to go through it a second time, but most of us are new, but yeah.
questions? What?
All right.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much. All right. That's the last agenda item. Okay. I've messed up a couple of times today, so I just wanted to make sure. I also wanted to, since we have a few minutes, appreciate, I'm going to do a tiny story, and it's actually going somewhere. So when I was in college, music performance was one of my majors, and my then voice coach invited me and my family to go to a wonderful performance, and it was by an extended vocalist, so it's like 20th century, avant-garde vocalizing. And at the end, everyone stood up and gave a strong ovation, just except my dad, who was sitting next to me and just said, "What the hell was that?" And I just so deeply, my love and respect for my dad just deepened in that moment, that in an entire room filled with adoring fans of this thing, he stayed seated and true to his conviction that that was not something he ever wanted to experience again. And I say that because I think oftentimes consensus in a body is seen as the thing to be lauded. And I just want to acknowledge, like, Commissioner Knowles was the sole no vote on something, and I think that is to be celebrated. That if we consistently have unanimity in all of our deliberations and in all of our votes, I don't think that we have had a robust enough conversation, and we have not considered enough proposals to bring ourselves where I think we need to be. And if anything, I would hope for us more struggle, which I have a feeling later this year, that wish will be granted. And so I really want to appreciate the time today, Commissioner Knowles, and in other times where people have been in a minority and have stood up for their convictions and for their conscience. And I hope that that's something that we continue to celebrate and we lift up. So.
I should say no more often.
I will be deeply disappointed if you do not. So, and with that, we'll see you all in a couple of weeks. Thanks to everyone and to staff for joining us today. We are adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners.
Gonna say no for fun, though.
There's an amendment.
Well, I live in Northeast. I'm unemployed, so I can go anywhere.
Understand.
We're at 37 months.
Oh, okay. I'm right on the line.
Okay, so we could meet somewhere in that for coffee on the little. They're open again.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
New owners. I don't know that.
Same way?
My wife was in here the other day. She said it doesn't have quite the selection of the big goods that you have, but it's a coffee shop. You know? So, what's the best way? Email or?
Yeah, let's do that. Do you, I wonder if you're all, do we have a listing spot going with
A what?
like all the email list of all the.
The only list I have is, I mean, I can email you on the city. Or.
Oh, so you don't want, all. Very
exciting.
There you go.
All right, that's good. I don't have it.
That's okay, yeah, no worries.